Well, hi everybody. My name is Jim Burns, and right now you are in the Bullyproof Classroom Online Academy. The course that you are taking is Motivating Disaffected and Hard to Handle Students. And I must say that of all the questions and all of the in-services that I've done, this is the toughest kid to work with. Kids who are unmotivated, kids who don't care, kids who may or may not have clinical issues, meaning they're depressed or potentially they could be have a lot of anxiety and other problems that interfere with learning. But by far, this is the toughest kid that we deal with in school today, because you can't do the work for them. You can't get them to come to school. You can't get them to be on time. It's just never really a complete behavior problem, but they are almost passive-aggressive. They are hard to handle, hard to come up with interventions for. And I think that in the course of our time together, we're going to come up with some really good strategies, and I'm going to give you a reason why some of this stuff is going on with our students. Now, within the course, you're going to have, it's 5 hours, you're going to get this video, and you're going to get a lecture document, meaning during the course of the 5 hours, you'll have an opportunity to look over the lecture, which is in written form, and there will be questions there that you can answer for yourself or share them with colleagues to help come up with other solutions that meet the needs of your school and your classroom. So this course not only gives you this video, I call it a video cast, if you will, a combination of a podcast and a PowerPoint, but you're going to get a document that gives you a lecture of the 5 hours. It's not going to be a transcript. It's going to be essays, if you will, that are associated with this video, and it'll give you an opportunity to turn it off. Let's see what we can discuss about certain issues that we're facing in our own school that'll help you deal with this problem. So let's take a look, first of all, at what we see. What we see. See, we are very symptomatic in education, meaning we see symptoms, we treat symptoms, but we never get to the root problem. And the root problem could be a lot of things. I certainly believe that it's one thing. And some of the symptoms of a disaffected kid are what you see on the screen there. Self-criticism, difficulty loving others. Now remember, these are the symptoms. Inability to trust people. Maybe they're overly shy. And don't confuse shy with an introvert. Shyness is a fear of social judgment. Introversion is a personality characteristic that just means you enjoy your alone time. You enjoy being alone. You might enjoy reading a book. You might enjoy sitting and doing your work on your own rather than in cooperative groups. That's introversion, and that's a personality characteristic, and we don't want to confuse that with shyness. Other symptoms: perfectionism. To put the wall up, they may have attitudes of superiority so that you don't see their weaknesses. Sometimes they're trying to hide features in their life that are unchangeable, meaning there's not one thing that you can do to change the feature in your life. And we're going to go over those 10 unchangeables. And it's nothing that's remarkable. They're just basic things, but you would be surprised what affects kids and makes them disaffected. Now, there you had some of your symptoms. Now, here are some of the causes of the symptoms. They might feel inferior. They may have guilt. They may worry. They could have anxiety. They could have, let me get back to that. They could be insecure. They might be bored. Maybe the work, maybe they're smarter than what you give them credit for, and they're bored with the work that they're doing. They just can't deal with it. Now, the root problem. The root problem. And this is something that we have to really begin to wrap our heads around. This is what is really eating away at the kid. This is what's way down deep, and we have to be aware of it. The root problem is bitterness. Not anger, but bitterness. Bitterness is long-standing, and the kid feels as if they don't have any control. Adults as well. And when you begin to take a look at the unchangeables and the failure to accept what is unchangeable in their life, some things that they absolutely hate, what you're going to discover is that bitterness is beginning to cause some of the problems that we just saw above, and I'm going to go back to them. Some of the symptoms that you see. Wishful comparison. Oh, how I wish I was. Oh, how I wish I was smarter. Oh, how I wish I was more outgoing. Well, let me buy some new clothes and maybe try to fit in a little bit better. Oh, how I wish that I didn't get everything wrong. They're trying to be perfect all the time. And then we move in once again into the surface causes, and you can see where a lot of this fits in, how those 9 things just fit in to what's eating away at kids. The root problem, again, is that bitterness. Anger is fleeting. You get angry over a situation, you have a flat tire, somebody might be short with you, you have an argument, you get over it, and so on. Bitterness is a feeling that you have when you believe you have no control over a situation. You've lost control and you're looking for things that you can control. And whether we want to believe it or not, there is no control over certain things. Some people get into relationships and they try to control the other person. Well, wanting to control the other person is only the symptom. The root problem is the bitterness. The bitterness that they feel because they can't control anything. Now, when does bitterness occur? Bitterness occurs when a child rejects features in his life that are unchangeable. By the way, I use child here, and I use he in many instances. It could be he, she. I don't want anyone to think I'm just referring to boys or to men. It could be he, she, either a guy or a gal. Any one of them can have it. So this could be an adult that rejects features in their life or his life that are unchangeable. The child has been wounded emotionally by a parent or significant other. And believe me when I'm telling you, kids can get wounded at an early age. And you see, when they're at a very young age, like 5 years old, what begins to happen is the window of opportunity is way open, meaning the social and emotional environment that kid is in, he's drinking in everything that's happening to him. and he is developing a private logic associated with the events. My father doesn't make time for me. Yeah, maybe he's the last one born in the family. Okay, I always get the leftovers. How come I don't get to do what my brother or sister did? He had a cell phone before I did. Why can she wear makeup before I do? All of these things, can wound a kid, and usually it's the unfairness that they sense within the family and how they're treated. The third one is they could have been bullied and lost their ability to stick up for themselves. Now, when a person doesn't have the capacity to deal with a confrontation, what will happen is they will begin to lose their confidence in relationships. And there is something that I've spoken about, and I'll speak about it again. Productive conflict. Kids need to have productive conflicts. They need to be able to disagree with the right attitude, and they need to be able to cooperate even though they disagree. Those productive conflicts help the child develop confidence. And lots of times when kids are bullied, they're too afraid to have that productive conflict. They're too afraid to disagree. They're too afraid to stand up for themselves. They're too afraid to say things. This all creates, moving forward, bitterness in the child's life. So bullying has a large part in the victims of bullying who have become so angry and so they're almost separated from other people that ultimately, and I'll ask this question, how many times have you seen a bully go into a school and shoot it up, or go into any place and shoot it up? They will always refer to a victim. And if we want to work with kids who have been bullied, we have to help them, number one, develop their resiliency skills so that they can stand up for themselves, because without that, they become bitter and they begin to act out later in life. Now, here are the unchangeables that I want to go over with you. And you can see, just by looking at this list, physical characteristics, can't change it. Parents can't change it. Can't change your brothers and sisters. I'm not going to get into gender so much here, because we all now have the capacity to be able to change our gender if we care to. If we find that our gender is affecting us, or we feel as if we need to make a change in who we are. So I'm not going to get into that, but you are, and I am, we are biologically born either a boy or a girl. And there are things that we can do now to change that. Birth order. I was number 3 in my family. By the time I came along, my parents were so burned out they didn't have time for me. They absolutely didn't have time. They were always working, and I was kind of left alone most of the time to fend for myself. And I have story after story. If you care to take a look online or look at the new 3 R's in education, or there's an older book that's out there that's called The Ramblings of a Dinosaur, take a look at some of that stuff, and you'll find that being the last born in the family can have some very negative effects on somebody. So their time in history, nationality, who we are, our mental capacity. You have an IQ, and it never changes. You develop the ability to work a little harder and to put your effort in to memorize material and learn, but your capacity, your mental capacity, your IQ stays the same. So those are the unchangeables. And when we go back to the root problem, if we're upset, or if we full well know that we can't control some of these unchangeables, and these unchangeables are affecting us in a way that prevents us from learning, we will develop a disaffected personality. We will have the symptoms, we will have some of the surface causes, and the root problem will lead us right into bitterness. The root problem is bitterness, and we're going to walk right down that path because these are things that are absolutely uncontrollable. Now, let's take a look at this for a moment. This is going to take a little bit of time to develop. Our boys who went into the service, many of them came home years ago, and they were called shell-shocked. Then they had battle fatigue. Now they have what's called post-traumatic stress disorder. Post-traumatic stress disorder is nothing more than the idea that every situation that creates stress, you think you're going to die. You think that there's no way out. And we used to associate this with the service. Today there is something that's called complex post-traumatic stress disorder, and or it's also known as developmental trauma disorder. And this is not even in the DSM-4 manual for psychological disorders. This is a proposed diagnostic term for a set of symptoms resulting from prolonged stress of a social or interpersonal nature. And this especially in the context of interpersonal dependence. In other words, it happens when I'm a kid. And as I am raised in a stressful environment, parents are fighting, parents are divorced, domestic violence in the family, child abuse, alcoholism, poverty, bullying, any number of these things that just keep going on and on. As a child, what happens is I drink that in when I'm younger, and my moral compass gets thrown off. Now, what that means is I start to have difficulty trying to figure out right and wrong behaviors because of what I've observed. Is it okay to act this way? And I may grow up angry at my own parents because of how they treated me. As a matter of fact, I don't think you could grow up and not be angry at your parents based upon some of the treatment that you may receive. So what happens? If an individual grows up in life with contempt for their parents, they lose that compass. They lose the ability to determine right from wrong. And sometimes even the simplest decisions create stress for them. And things like lying, stealing at low levels don't bother them. They think it's okay. Sometimes fighting, abusing someone, bullying someone, all of that seems okay. It's like no big deal. If you take a look at an article that I wrote called The Making of a Bully, what you'll discover is this. If an individual is raised in an environment by the victim of bullying, if he hasn't overcome the bitterness, or she hasn't overcome the bitterness associated with that bullying, what will happen is they will enter into a relationship and they will end up being abusive in that relationship. What the child observes, if they have children, what they observe is that the way I get what I want is through fear and intimidation, and it becomes the victim who produces the next bully. That child goes to school and starts to bully others in school. And he's not even in an environment where the parent he's in an environment where the parent was victimized. The anger that the parent experienced, and the bitterness, he ended up taking it out on his family, and the child goes to school, raised by a victim, and became a bully. CPTSD. We are dealing with this now more than ever. It is stress related. It is something that we need to take a closer look at if in fact we're going to be successful dealing with the victims of bullying, and if we're going to motivate those kids who just seem like if you put a stick of dynamite under their seat, they wouldn't do anything. Now, CPTSD. Check it out. Do some reading on it. You'll be glad you did. Now, to put the feet to it, in order to help this kid become more motivated, we have to look at a process. First of all, none of the stuff that we're talking about, that I just spoke about, or that I'm going to speak about, will work unless we deal with the bitterness first. Unless we deal with the bitterness first. If we don't deal with that, nothing else matters. Nothing else will matter. It's kind of like you go to a workshop and you learn a whole bunch of stuff, great techniques for managing kids in your classroom who are unruly, and you go back and you try to implement some of the strategies, and you find out they're still not listening, and the reason they're still not listening is because respect wasn't present first. In order for anything to work, respect has got to be present. In order for anything to work with a disaffected kid, we've got to get to the root problem, and we have to help the kid overcome the bitter. We have to help this kid overcome some of the problems that are associated with many of the things that have gone on in his life. And this process is a hands-on process. In other words, there's things that we can do, but if we don't give the kid the relief from a lot of the symptoms and help them overcome some of the bitterness first, the process won't work. By the way, I wanted to share one thing with you guys. The manifestation of disrespect in a kid is laziness. See, it's not that the kid won't do it. He just won't do it for you. Why won't he do it for you? Because he doesn't respect you. That's why two teachers can have such a different opinion of the same kid. How's John doing? John's doing great. Love to have him in class. You ask another teacher, he doesn't even know John exists. John respects one teacher and rejects the other one based upon personality. So we're going to take a look at the 5-step process first. And here they are. And this is stuff that we do normally. We do a lot of this stuff in our classroom. We emphasize effort, we create hope, we have to defer to their power. You know why? Because they're not going to do the work anyway. So we have to give them that. We have to build relationships with the kids, and we have to express enthusiasm. And to a disaffected kid, sometimes you could stand on your head, and they're not going to become very enthusiastic. See? So this is what we need to do. Those are the things that we need to work on. But we have to be sure we help the kid overcome. Now notice I don't say anger. I say bitterness. Because bitterness means I can't control the situation. Anger I can control. Bitterness I can't. So we have to be careful how we manage this. Okay? And if these things aren't working, we've got to go back to the fork in the road and say, what is this kid angry at? What is it that he is rejecting? And we can see all the other things, all the other symptoms, and we can see all the other attitudes. But the bottom line, what are we seeing? What are we believing that this kid has to overcome? It could be inferiority. It could be he has to accept some of the unchangeables in his life that he's not very happy with. There was a young gal that I was working with many years ago, and she was on the basketball team, and her father asked me to speak with her, and I did. And I asked her, if there was one thing in your life that you would like to change, what would it be? And she said to me, my height. She was unhappy with her height. And what's that? It's an unchangeable physical characteristic. Can't change it. You can change your weight, but you can't change your height. And I says, why do you want to change your height? Well, she happened to want to go out on dates and things like that, and the boys were just a little bit reluctant to go out with her because she was 6'2" on the basketball team. So she was having difficulty. Once we got her to accept how she was put together and her height and basically how she was designed, it became easier for her to accept her height. And as she accepted that characteristic, her confidence grew, and she began to attract boys who were the same height as her, or maybe slightly shorter, but she was, because of the confidence that she was exuding, there was a lot of people that wanted to date her. She was bitter about the physical characteristic. Once we got her beyond that point, the situation started to change for her, and she started to be able to go out with boys, and she ended up meeting a very nice boy in college. They ended up getting married and so on, and they're very happy. So it's one of those things. Now that's a success story. For every success story, I probably have had 10 failures, so you need to be aware of that. I'm sharing that with you because it happened to be something that worked. But I've tried a lot of things, especially with kids who are disaffected, and we look at disaffected and we call it, depressed, suicidal, we call it anxious, we call it a lot of things. The bottom line is, you think disaffected, you think bitterness. Disaffected bitterness. That's the reason why they are disaffected many times. I'm not going to say it's the only time, and there is no silver bullet that's going to solve the problem. But if you start to make that association, what you're going to discover is that more times than not, it's going to be worth it. Now, I just hit the button here for a second. By the way, we were cut off for about 3 seconds there earlier, and I apologize. So it's a 5-step process. Emphasizing effort. Emphasizing effort. Kids put in effort all the time. Half of the time, though, we're not sure whether they're putting in their best effort. So we have to begin to take a look at what we can do in terms of effort. Now, we have to make mistakes or partially correct answers okay. And I think we do that to a large degree, but I want us to understand that mistakes get made and they don't get corrected until we've worked with kids 6 or 7 times. It takes a lot of work and a lot of effort to be able to get to a point where kids are going to give you the right answer or the right response, or they're going to line up correctly. And I think too often we get hard on kids when they make certain mistakes, and it's especially if you're a parent. A kid will hit a certain point in his life where he'll say or she'll say, I can't please my father anyway. What's the use in trying? And that's the statement we want to avoid in our classrooms. I can't please my teacher anyway. What's the use in trying? And they give up. So what you have to do is you have to build on mistakes. Kids are going to give you wrong answers, but we want to acknowledge that some of it was right. Some of it was right. And sometimes when kids are making statements, especially in a high school class, that we may disagree with, we don't want to poo-poo it. We, too, have to learn how to disagree with the right attitude and let them know that it was a great discussion. We have to allow kids to revise, redo, and retake. And this is not just, disaffected kids. Go over it again. Redo it. Is there anything so wrong with retaking a test? I know we're trapped in lockstep curriculum right now. But learning doesn't take place until material is memorized. No learning takes place unless it's memorized. So what we want to do is we want to give them an opportunity to go over material, revise material, redo it, retake the test. We have to spiral some of the instruction that we have where we're covering old material with new material. This testing situation that most schools, or all schools I believe, are going through happens so fast that the kids don't have an opportunity to memorize the material. And no learning takes place unless material is memorized. And we have become too efficient in our education and not effective. Efficient means you do it quickly, speedily, and you get it done. Things like handing out supplies, answering emails, taking attendance, those things need to be done efficiently. That's paperwork, and if you have a paraprofessional, they can almost be done by them. But what we've done is we do those things effectively and we teach efficiently. And we don't want to teach fast. Too much, too fast won't last. The material is not going to stick. Kids begin to fail, and as they fail over and over again, they get the impression that they're not good students. Sometimes failure can cause them to begin to get down on themselves. They lose their confidence. And what happens? They say to themselves, I'm not going to do too good anyway. What's the use in trying? So we have to allow those 3 R's. We have to separate effort from achievement when grading. And I will tell you this, there are some kids that work harder and longer than a lot of other kids, and they get a C. And there are some kids that are going to get an A, no matter what they do. That's the mental capacity that I was talking about. Kids will put in a ton of effort. Their capacity, though, that they're going to get to see. And then you have other kids who have a stronger mental capacity. Doesn't matter what they do, they're going to get an A. We have to take small bites. Small bites. We can't be trying to engulf too much with each lesson. We have to encourage students to improve one thing at a time. Show simple courtesies, which is saying hello when you see a student. And sometimes these disaffected kids we don't like a lot. And that's where I've often said, to say to a kid, I like you but don't like your behavior, is ridiculous. But we still have to put in the effort ourselves, say hello, how you doing, and speak to them. Once kids become good students, really good students, those kids become more likable. And we tend to spend more time with them than the kids that are having difficulty. Let the kid know you care more about them than their performance scholastically, how well they're doing academically. That's what you want to let kids know, that you really do care more about them. So in other words, they're not defined by their performance. They are defined by who they are as people. Ask for small things first. Celebrate markers and endings. And this is as a class. We just completed chapter 3. We did pretty good. Hey, you know what? You got that page of work done. Great work. I'm happy that you did it. This is with disaffected kids. They need to have something to hang their hat on. Creating hope. Creating hope. And this is the bottom line with hope. Students who believe they can't master the curriculum or that mastery will not improve their lives are the least motivated at all. There's a mountain that they feel like they're going to climb. What we have to do is turn the mountain into a hill so that they can get over it a step at a time. Look, it took a long time for them to become disaffected. What we want to do now is we want to give them small hills that they can get over. Small, and you certainly do not want them. You do not want them to, you don't want to give up on them, first of all. But you want to give them something that they can do and do well. You want them to perform something well, the smallest of things, and take small bites out of the curriculum and help them master the one or two things that you believe are important. And I've often said, good grades are nice, mastery is better. You want kids to master material. I've often thought that classroom experts were really good. In other words, a kid might ask me a question and I would say, you know what, I don't know the answer, but I know John's an expert on it. Go ask him. Let another student answer the question and give that student an opportunity to exhibit his smarts in helping someone out. That just absolutely develops confidence in the kids. Now, more hope. More hope. And I think we've covered this in terms of how achievement benefits the kids' lives, create challenges that can be mastered, ensure the adequacy of the 3 R's, and acknowledge mistakes. Are mistakes. This helps kids get their hands on things that are tangible. Things that are tangible. And I want to, you know what, let's just talk for a second about ensuring the adequacy of the 3 R's. It doesn't matter what level a kid is at, but each kid must leave school with basic knowledge in reading, writing, and arithmetic. That's how you succeed. Basic knowledge in reading, writing, because you need those things to survive in life. So take a kid who knows nothing, who cares about nothing, who is disaffected. If we could just work with them so that they will have the tools to survive in life, we will be doing something rather important for that child. Now, defer to the student's power. And power struggles are things that we go through all the time. We go through power struggles all the time with kids. And certain kids who are passive-aggressive, we're never going to win that struggle because we're not a dentist. And it's like pulling teeth. So what we want to do is we want to let that kid know, I don't want a power struggle with you because neither of us want to lose. It's that simple. I don't want to engage in a struggle with you. What am I doing? First of all, I'm acknowledging the power, letting him know he's got some, and I don't want to have a fight with you. Certain kids have the power to do certain things that are inappropriate. And when they don't use it, we thank them for it. And when they do something, we both know you have the power to complete this work. Thanks for using it. And if we know that they have the power to do something inappropriate and they don't do it, thanks for not using it. Acknowledging the power that the kid has. Ask for an opinion. What do you think? Teach a lesson. Have the kid teach the lesson or explain something that you know he's good at. And go over it and see how well he does. Teach responsibility and self-control. And I will share this with you. Self-control is taught. There is no question about it, and you'll find it in your notes when you go back to the lecture. Self-control is taught. And by that I mean, if there is a consequence for my lack of self-control, I will be a person who was never taught how to control themselves. For example, I can't stop drinking, can't stop smoking, can't stop swearing. I'm in a position where I can't stop spending. I can't stop eating. What'll happen? There'll be a consequence for all of that. And who's responsible for who? I am responsible for me. So I have to control myself. Self-mastery is critical. There are people who are in administration today or who are in leadership positions today who don't have self-mastery. And you can't have mastery over others until you can control yourself. Babe Ruth wanted to be a manager in the worst way. And they wouldn't let him do it because he didn't have self-control. He ate and drank to oblivion and smoked to oblivion. And it ultimately affected his life, and he didn't get the job that he wanted once he left baseball. Speak to the student in private. Don't confront them in front of the class. You'll just embarrass them, and you will set off a major power struggle. Call home to speak to the student, not the parent. There you have it. Emphasize success and acknowledge the students who already have the skills to succeed. So, I was working. They asked me to do a bullying presentation to kids from the kindergarten to the 8th grade, and I was not going to do the kindergarten. But they talked me into it. I go into this kindergarten class with 60 kindergarten kids to try and do a bullying presentation. Kids were all over the room in 10 minutes. One of the supervisors came into the room and went, "Josh, you're sitting so nice." And the whole group just went, and they went right together and sat down. What was happening? The supervisor emphasized the success that other students had in being in their seat. And what did that do? It motivated the other kids to do the same thing. Emphasize success and acknowledge students who already have the skill. Don't use extrinsic reinforcement. It promotes temporary relief, not permanent help. Temporary relief means it stops for today. Permanent help means it stops forever. And that's what extrinsic reinforcement does. All it does is give you temporary relief. It doesn't change the character of the kid, and it doesn't change the kid from the inside out. Now, the material that I'm about to present, I have presented this for 20 years, maybe longer. And it's something that we need to look at seriously and critically. And I call it the keys to the foundation of character. And this is something that works well when you implement it from the top down. Now, when kids are born, I want you to look at the tip of the triangle. The tip of the triangle represents levels of freedom. And as you move down the triangle, a person gets more freedom. I used to ask my dad, how did you get a furlough when you were in the service? He said, there's only one way to get a furlough. You got to do what you're told when you're told to do it. Or you don't go out on the weekends, or you'll end up peeling potatoes. So, compliance is important when kids are very young. And we're going to say from ages 0 to 5 or 6. That's when we have to restrain certain behaviors that we don't want. This gives a kid the clear picture as to what he needs to do. In other words, there isn't any gray area. They're not growing up in life trying to figure it out. They know right from wrong. Remember, the window of opportunity closes at 5. And when kids start kindergarten, that's when the window of opportunity closes socially and emotionally. So all of the positive things that we want to pour into that kid from a character standpoint, and for them to have a positive moral compass, has to happen between 0 to 5. Not that it can't happen thereafter. Now, once we are sure that we get compliance, once we're sure that we have a compliant kid, we then can, oh, by the way, in the tip of that triangle, you're not giving any choices. There's not a choice with certain things. It's not what do you want to wear, what do you want to eat, where do you want to go, what do you want to do. It's you're telling them what to do because they're little, and you want to pour in the correct responses. Once they can figure out what some of the correct responses are, and the correct way to act, and the correct way to speak, and the correct way to handle themselves at the kitchen table or in a restaurant or maybe going to the movies, once they've got that figured out, and they're not going to get it right away, and they're not going to be perfect right away, then you can start asking certain questions. Because once you get compliance and once you get respect, let me tell you something, it becomes far easier to ask questions. Then you can move down that triangle. Then you can move down the triangle. And as you move down the triangle, what you're going to discover is that kids go into mental puberty around the age of 10. And that's when we have to really begin to stress respect. And when they can self-generate and self-regulate their behavior, then they're ready to almost have adult interaction, relational interaction. Then they're ready to have that conversation with you. Then we can talk about what happens when you say no. And how do you say no? And how do you disagree with the right attitude? How do you cooperate with the right attitude? And we want to teach respect at this age. We want to encourage respect, and we want to strengthen the kid's character. In other words, we already have the foundation. What we want to do now is we want to stress the character associated with the behavior, so now they have a reason why they're doing what they're doing. Too many kids come into school and say, why do I got to do this? Well, they're not going to ask that question scholastically, because they understand that the reason that they have to do it is because it's a stepping stone to the next level in their education, which ultimately brings them to a point when they're in the 12th grade, when they're going to be looking to get into college. They'll understand, even when they are younger, that this curriculum that they're covering is a stepping stone to get them where they need to be. Next, with teenagers, we can lead by the power of our relational influence. Between the ages of kindergarten and the 5th grade, kids want the teacher's attention. Between 6th to the 12th grade, they want each other's attention. We have to lead when kids get older by the power of our relational influence and help them understand how to interact with one another, and help them understand relationships and friendships and apply it in life. And once we've got it, once they're compliant, once they're respectful, once they're responsible, then we're at the bottom of the triangle, and that's where they have the keys to the kingdom, because they've mastered respect, responsibility, and compliance. This is key. This is important. And I want to share something with you. I'm just going to back up for a half a second here. When kids are little, it's very easy to try and restrain their behaviors, because you're only going to have to deal with tantrums. Talking about 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe 6, but you have, small things to manage at that point. Now, as kids move forward in life, we end up doing exactly the opposite. This is what we're doing now. We allow freedom and choices to young children ages 2 to 9. See, because you could put up temper tantrums and crying and whining. It's just too easy to give in to this kid. And once they get to a point where they believe that they could get anything they want, they don't have any boundaries when they're teenagers. They become argumentative. And then the concern starts to develop on the part of the teacher regarding the behavior. And the behavior may very well be disaffected because of the fact that they don't have that compass that I spoke about. And they're failing, and they're starting to realize that they're failing, and they're having terrible relationships with other people, and they are beginning to realize that, and consequently they start to get down on themselves and lose confidence. Power struggles when they're much older, no character, and you cannot restrain the behaviors of a rebellious teenager. You see what's happening? Look at the top of the triangle now. You've given them all the freedom when they're younger. Now you're trying to restrain a teenager, which is almost impossible to do. So we have to be cautious to follow that triangle top to bottom. And if they're in school and they haven't been exposed to that type of treatment, they're going to have to learn how to get used to it. And it's something that needs to be communicated to parents so that they understand, look, either he complies or he doesn't get certain things, like a party, like rewards. He doesn't get to go to the treasure box because his behavior was inappropriate. The difference between liberty and freedom is so obvious, and I'm just going to read this to you. Most children believe the way to get more freedom is to get out from under authority. For example, move out of the house or do what they want in school. True freedom is a result of trust. See, the more I trust that kid, the more freedom I'm going to give him. When I don't trust you, I don't give you any freedom. Trust is built through that compliance. Once I know I got a compliant kid on my hands, okay, then I trust him. The more compliant a child is, the greater the trust, and guess what? More freedom. There's a difference between freedom and liberty. Liberty is a condition of the environment. See, anyone can move out of a house. You have liberty within your environment. Anyone can walk out of a class. Anyone can cut school. Anyone can give someone else the finger. Freedom is a condition of the mind and soul. And as children experience non-compliance, they're doing what they want in terms of the environment. If we're allowing it, if we're giving them the liberty to do it, what we're creating is a guilty conscience. The kid's guilt is starting to build up. The more guilt that they experience, guess what? The more angry and non-compliant they become. And what do you think that anger converts to? It converts to bitterness. So this is something I want us to understand, and it is completely associated with the two triangles that we saw above in the previous two slides. Now, build relationships. This is another piece associated with managing a disaffected kid. And this is very, very, very easy to understand. The one thing I'd like us to cover is the thing I like most about you. The thing I like most about you goes like this. Let's just say it's October. The kids have gotten to know each other. You collect names on a slip of paper, put them into a hat. Someone selects a name out of a hat. Okay, today it's Joe. Joe, okay, you don't have to participate in the activity. You can sit off to the side, read a book, run an errand, do whatever you want to do. I'll tell you what to do, but you can relax. Now, the rest of the class is given a sheet of paper with a stem on it, and it says, Dear Joe, in this case. The thing I like most about you is, and what they have to do is tell what they like about Joe, and then give Joe supporting details that explain why they like that about him. Joe, the thing I like most about you is your humor. You told jokes at the cafeteria table the other day that had all of us laughing. And everyone writes a letter to Joe. Now, those letters get collected by the teacher. She reads them, or he reads them. That's quality control. And if somebody doesn't want to participate in this, they will eventually. Why? Because they're going to want a piece of the action. This is a great activity to help build the confidence of kids who are having difficulty or who are unmotivated. Next, either the teacher or the students themselves read the letter that they wrote to Joe. Next, all the letters go into a folder. Let's say Joe likes baseball. We give him a baseball decorated folder. We put all the letters in there with a little ribbon on it. He gets to take that folder home with him and look at them anytime he wants. And that helps build confidence. And you do that with every kid in the class. Now, I'm going to be including in the lecture document a list of 50 character qualities with their definitions and their opposites that you can use for this activity. And it works well. People think that it doesn't matter. Here's the point that I'm going to make to you. There was a young man in the 6th grade who, and this is a chicken soup for the soul story, he's in the 6th grade, and the teacher says, I want everybody to write down one nice thing about another person. Well, some people had 5 nice things written down, some had 3, some had 2. This kid gets 1. Fast forward the tape 4 or 5 years, 6 years, he gets drafted, goes into Vietnam, gets killed. He comes home from the service, his body is laid out. The 6th grade teacher comes to the wake, and several of his other hometown classmates were there. The father said to the teacher, his effects were sent home today, and he had the kid's wallet. And he said to him, I looked in it, and this is the only thing I found. And it was the letter that was written to him in the 6th grade with the one nice thing that somebody liked about him. And then everybody else who was there said, I still have mine. I carry mine around. People want to hear from their own peers things said to them that are nice. At the high school level, you may want to do compliment groups, where kids have to get together and learn how to compliment each other. Invest 2 uninterrupted minutes each day for 10 days straight. That's known as the 2 by 10. 2 minutes a day for 10 days straight. I'm going to have a conversation with you like I would with a good friend. Genuine praise, not white noise. Genuine praise from you with supporting details. I love how you keep your desk so neat and how you cleaned it up. You've inspired me to clean mine. Affirmation, attention, appreciation, affection, loving talk, caring conversation. Not only do you help disaffected kids, you help the entire class, and you also help take a bite out of the bullying problem in your classroom, because it's been proven that the thing I like most about you, number 1, helps the bully because he never realized that everybody thought so highly of him, and it helps the victim because the bully doesn't want to rain on everybody else's parade and pick on him because everybody had so many nice things to say about him. Critical activities that we need to be involved with. Now, this is our bricks in the wall, and I have taught this many times. What this means is this: all incoming information has to pass through the emotions before it can get processed by the neocortex. The limbic system, the mind, the will, the emotion. All the information has to pass through that. So if I am giving a kid a hard time, it's not so much how he acts toward me, it's how he remembers what I did and how much stress I created in his life during the course of our time in that classroom. My name will go on one of those small bricks that I have there. And anytime that kid gets in my presence, he's going to feel stressed out. He will downshift and go into the stem. The stem is where people go for survival. And we all know how people survive. It's either fight or flight. So that kid is either going to run and hide mentally, or he's going to go toe-to-toe with me and have a power struggle. So if I look at a kid and say, when are you going to get it right? I'm so sick of you. I can't stand, what you're doing here. You're out of control. And we really get on this kid in front of others. I'm automatically on one of the bricks. And it takes a long time to get off. Now, how do you get off? You have to, as a teacher, acknowledge to this kid that there's a problem. You have to sit down and try and say to him, look, I know that there's some problem here between us. I want to work it out. See, he's angry at you. He's growing bitter toward you. So, I want to let you know I'm going to make some adjustments. And I hope that you'll work with me. But the first thing I want to know is, will you forgive me for how I've been treating you? And the kid's going to look at you. Yeah, you got to ask that question. You know why? Because your life's going to be unmanageable down the road, in a very short period of time. So you might as well get this out in the open and straighten it out. The kid is going to say, oh yeah, sure, I'll forgive you. And then you think everything's okay, right? Well, it's not. The kid's going to wait for the evidence to support what you said. So the next time he comes to class late, the next time he makes a mistake, the next time he has and this kid's going to revisit old behaviors. The next time anything goes wrong, he's going to wait for your reaction to it. And if you pass the test, guess what happens? You come off the brick. That is known as making a deposit into someone's emotional bank account. Coming off the brick means that now the bank account is zero. And what we have to do, that got us back to zero once we get off the brick. Now we have to because we were way overdrawn before that occurred. So now we got to get back and start adding to the emotional bank account and building that trust. Once you get stuff built up in that emotional bank account, then you can make a mistake. That's when you can make a mistake. Because you're only going to make a small withdrawal. Now, if you continue to make mistakes, and continue to goof up, and continue to have problems, you're gonna bring that account down, and ultimately you'll be overdrawn again. That's when you got to have the conversation again. And by the way, that works in relationships as well. People don't trust each other. It works in schools. It's not that morale is low in schools. It's trust. I don't trust you. I don't trust a lot of people around me. So what we have to do is we have to regain the trust that was lost. Administrators who have difficulty with their staff doesn't trust them. He has to regain that trust. He can't throw teachers under a bus, or she throw teachers under a bus. He has to begin to work to build that relationship all over again, as we do with our kids. And if this is going on from a school-wide standpoint, then you start to have an environment where everyone starts to feel good about what's going on. The confidence level goes up. And we start working together as a team to help educate those kids. Now, let's talk about stress for a minute. And as the brain is placed under stress, it goes into the stem. And I want us to understand right here, a person who has the flight mentality develops clinical problems. Depressed, anxious, and so on, because they're always running away, and they have to be made more responsible. A person who has the fight mentality could have conduct problems. They require respect Okay, they have to work on respect because they're always involved in a power struggle. So clinical problems require responsibility and conduct problems require respect. Now, if an environment feels emotionally unsafe to a child, and I mean not only your classroom but the school, and the kid is too frightened to leave the room because he may end up confronting someone who's going to give him a hard time or potentially bully him, he is not on the same page as you are while you're teaching your lesson. His mind is, how am I going to survive it when Frank confronts me out in the hall? How am I going to survive it? What am I going to do? So then the kid then ends up turning inward. He gets upset with himself because he doesn't know what to do. And we have to then begin to look inside and say, we have to teach him how to handle conflict. We have to teach him how to develop courage. We have to teach him how to say, stop, knock it off. Because if we don't, once he turns on himself, that anger on himself, which ultimately will spread into bitterness, he then becomes depressed. He looks like a clinical kid, but he's got everything turned inward right now. We have to help him get it out. And sometimes I've often said I'd rather deal with a conduct problem than a clinical problem. At least the conduct problem I could see what's coming. Clinical problems, we don't always see it. Next, express enthusiasm. And here's a whole bunch of stuff that we can do. But I think the biggest thing that we could do is let the students know that you love being their teacher. You love being their teacher. Use humor. Don't be a stuffed shirt. Laugh a little bit. Sometimes when we're losing control of a class, we laugh less, which makes the loss of control go all that much faster. Use sports, which is difficult to do today because we don't get outside enough in terms of recess and a lot of other things. I gave a basketball to some kids where I was working in a school who were standing out in the middle of the basketball court doing nothing. They started throwing the balls at one another. They didn't even realize that, that we could play a game. They didn't know how to organize a game on their own. Let me back up a minute. How often do we as teachers hang our credentials on the wall of our classroom? Meaning your master's degree or your bachelor's degree or your certificates to teach and so on. How often do we do it? Our position as teachers cost us as much time as anybody else who was going to school so that we could do what we do. Just because we don't make as much money as a doctor or a lawyer is no reason why we can't present our credentials on the wall of our classroom. Students will know that you love the subject area, that you're a lifelong learner, and they'll start asking you questions about what it was like when you went to college. That is so important. And it's something that we need to consider if, in fact, our kids are going to know that we love being their teacher and we love our job and we love our subject area. Even though the profession gets tough from time to time, like this time of year with all the testing that's gone on, and we feel like we're fried, kids need to still know that we enjoy what we do and we are lifelong learners. And I think it's important to put our credentials on the wall of our classroom. Now, let's move forward. 3 behaviors that need to be developed in all children. And this is a summation, if you will, of some of the stuff that we covered in the triangle. Respect, responsibility, compliance. Respect is the child's behavior violating the rights and privileges of others. Does his or her attitude communicate an ingratitude or disregard for others? Responsibility are the tasks being followed through on, and have I motivated the child to do the job initially by working with him? See, here's how responsibility is taught. You work with someone, with a child, and you show him how to do the job, how to add, how to subtract, how to divide, how to multiply. You go over that with him. And when you get to a point, you shift the responsibility to him just in time for him to sense the achievement himself for completing the task. That's how it works. And you could do that with teaching a kid how to cut the grass, shovel snow, clean the room, feed the dog. It doesn't matter. As you move through the activity, at a certain point, you shift the responsibility to him and let him experience the joy of that completion. And compliance, we've all spoken about this. You have to do what you're told, when you're told to do it, with the right attitude, and it's parents, teachers, employers, law enforcement officials. The list goes on. Everyone has to comply with something. And if you read some of the articles I've written on it, if you read the sign coming off the New Jersey Turnpike, it says you've left the New Jersey Turnpike, obey local speed laws. A review of how we can teach respect, sincerity, honesty, keep promises, praise character, not achievement, have clear expectations, teach your students what it takes to please you, and be aware what causes you to react. But if kids have clear expectations, there's not a problem if they know exactly what to do. Sincerity and honesty. You know how I look at sincerity and honesty? How did I do on that test, Mr. Burns? Well, we'll take it over again. You know, you can always try again, and you can try again. There's no question about it. But right now, you failed, and you got to do better. That's sincerity and honesty. Did he pass the test? No. So we have to be honest. Can he take it again? Sure. We're sincere. Let's try again. But you don't tell him that he did okay when he failed. That's unfair to the kid, and it will be more unfair to him moving forward as he grows older and he has a false sense of his academic ability. That's unfair when no one told him. Touching, I'm talking about a high five here or a pat on the back. Everybody knows how to do that. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm not talking about anything inappropriate there. Just touch, high five, pat on the back. Listening skills. There's 5 types of listening. You can ignore, which we do all the time. And I don't mean ignore, obviously ignore. I mean our mind is in another place. Number 2, you have pretend listening, which is what you do when you're on the phone with somebody and you want to get off and they don't. Then you have selective listening, which you do with a 2-year-old, because if you listen to everything a 2-year-old had to say, you'd go out of your mind. Then you have attentive listening, and then you have empathic listening. And you'll get some of this in the documents that I will be preparing for this lecture. Empathic listening means you listen with your eyes, your ears, your heart, your mind, your body, your soul. You're all in. You can visualize in your head exactly what the person is saying, and you can place yourself in that conversation. This is critical for kids that are disaffected. It's critical for the victims of bullying. It's critical to be a good listener. Victims of bullying need good listeners. And they have to know that they've been heard. Because if not, what will happen is they will feel as if that no one's helping them solve the problem, and they will end up taking matters into their own hands, and that's not good. because they don't know what they're doing yet, but they will know what they're doing if you listen to them. And there you have the 2x10 again. We call it the 2, 3, 4, 5x10. You can use as many minutes as you want. I'll guarantee you, if you build a relationship with the kid, it'll be more than 2 minutes. Okay, home stretch. Kids who are young lack something. They lack something that I call random access memory, RAM, like a computer. And they suffer from situational reactive disorder. Now, what is it? These are occurrences in an individual's life that he or she has not had time to rehearse for that led to an unfavorable response. I don't know what to do, so I'm going to react. They've never been taught, they've never been given the correct RAM built into their head, and they don't know what to do, so they react to people, to students, to situations, and so on. Now, when we look at issues like medicating kids, and so on, and I'm not going to get into that discussion here. There's about 4 different things, 4 different behaviors that we see. Medication will tune up the brain to a degree in terms of helping kids possibly learn a little bit better and focus. But most behaviors that we see in school today are not of the organic nature. In other words, where something is wrong with the brain. Most behaviors that we see in school today are learned behaviors. These are behaviors that have become part of the child's random access memory that they call upon when they're in difficult situations. And if all they've known, because they don't have the compass, remember that compass really gets developed around 5 or 6, if all they've known is to react, to fight, to act out, to shut down, to be depressed, to feel anxious, that's what they're going to do. And we have to reprogram that computer. We have to teach certain behaviors that we want kids to know about. Now, I've identified a few of them here. Kids have difficulty with relationships, family issues, dealing with mom or dad. Remember, that's an unchangeable. Fears and anxieties, self-acceptance issues, again, could be an unchangeable. Anger problems. And I don't mean bitterness here. I mean someone does something, you fly off the handle and you have a fight in 5 seconds rather than trying to work things out. Understanding right from wrong. Lying is wrong. Stealing is wrong. Cheating is wrong. Bullying is wrong. Peer pressure. What do you do when somebody wants you to do something that you don't want to do? And problems with authority. There is always someone in charge. Always. And that's what kids need to learn. So if we're going to help kids deal with situational reactive disorder, as I call it, that's my term, and handle the occurrences that occur in their life that they haven't had time to rehearse for, we have to figure out some of the larger areas that they need to work on. And that is, and this is just in my estimation, relationships, family issues, fears and anxieties, self-acceptance, anger, right versus wrong, problems with authority. Focus on those and make those part of your social problem-solving area. Remember, kids get depressed, kids get disaffected, kids get unmotivated for a myriad of reasons. But I think lots of times what we have to look at is how much true confidence do they have in these areas? And it's unfortunate when they get to school at 5 or 6 that sometimes the die has already been cast. So we have to begin to work with these kids at a young age to get them to a point where they can deal with certain issues that they have not had time to rehearse for. Compliance, when we're dealing with the correction of kids, this is a 3-step process. Number 1, we can't draw our boundaries in anger. We have to use the instruction, warning, and correction method. It's that simple. 2 basic methods of instruction: by example and by teaching specific information. And an adult who abruptly corrects a child assumes that he always communicated the correct information. And we have to determine whether or not we communicated correctly, and we do that with the use of the warning. The warning should be used to develop effective communication. It allows me to see life from a kid's point of view, and it shouldn't be used as a threat. It should be used to determine if we communicated the correct information, and it is not a prelude to punishment. What it is a way of trying to figure out if in fact our communication was straight. Once we find out that we communicated the correct information and the kid understood it and he didn't do it, then we can impose the warning with the correction that will follow. If you don't do what I tell you to do the next time, okay, you're going to be exposed to a consequence. And we have to consider the 3 objectives: respect, responsibility, and compliance. Was the student disrespectful? Were they irresponsible? Or were they non-compliant? And if in fact they were non-compliant and they were doing it willfully, then a consequence has to be in place. It has to be imposed. If in fact we find out that they didn't know what they were doing, we communicated information that wasn't understood, and they weren't compliant, and we discover that our communication wasn't good, there is no consequence if they do it the next time. Instruction, warning, correction. That's all you have to do. Follow those 3 steps. See, if parents use this right off the bat, what would happen is you'd have less angry kids coming into school. But kids get corrected, disciplined in anger so often. Kids get their boundaries set in anger so often. It's almost as if a kid that's 3 years old, he's getting corrected, and the kid's looking at mom or dad and saying, "You never told me. Maybe if you told me, I'd do it." Follow these 3 steps. This will make your life much easier. Now, next. We just covered that. We have to consider something here. And we're at the conclusion of this presentation, but I want to finish this up with some very important information. We can't solve a problem at the same level of thinking we were at when the problem was created. We just can't do it. And that should be created, ED on the end of that, not ING. I apologize. And we missed a few periods or 2 throughout this presentation as well. If you didn't pick it up, I did. And we had a few slides repeating themselves. And I apologize for that as well. That's Einstein. He said this. Here's the point that I'm going to make. This isn't the days of Ozzie and Harriet anymore, or Leave It to Beaver, or Father Knows Best, for those of you who are old enough to remember these things. We have to get out of the box and stop thinking that we can deal with this issue the same way we dealt with it 40 years ago. 40 years ago, things were a lot easier. And there's another course that I have. It's called 40 Years of Small Compromises. The small compromises that we made have led us to the position that we're in right now. Now we got to go back to the fork in the road and take a different direction. So this problem that we have right now is a result of 40 years of small compromises. And some things are just very simple. And if we can't explain it simply, we don't understand it well enough. But if you think about what we need to do with our young children in terms of respect, responsibility, compliance, and the ability to deal with certain issues in life that they're taught, that we teach them, and the ability to develop that moral compass, and the root problems that kids have when they come to school, which is one big root problem, which is bitterness. And if we can recognize those symptoms and recognize some of the attitudes and begin to correct them early on, we won't have disaffected kids, and kids will be more motivated to do work than ever before because they'll have the confidence. And we have to help them deal with the bullying epidemic that we have. This is critical. This is critical to the safety of our kids and to the education that's taking place in our country, because kids don't learn if they don't feel safe. This is a very, very important PowerPoint presentation that I'm sharing with you. I do hope that you take this information and run with it, and then do a little more research on your own to try and develop some of these topics further. Some of the other resources that you can go to, if you haven't done it, and I know that this will be viewed by a lot of people that I've had in my classes, download the Bullyproof Classroom app. It's in the App Store. It's on Google Play. There you have the links. You can go to it. If you look, you can look at this on your phone if you want, and click into it. And there's other courses that are on the Bullyproof Classroom Online Academy. Go take one or two. They will help you. They will give you information that's unique and practical and you haven't seen, and that we're not utilizing correctly. We're not doing the things that we truly need to do in education today. And quite frankly, some of it's so basic, it's incredible, as I shared just a few minutes ago. So let's get going, folks. That's the course. You're going to combine this now with the document that I'm going to prepare for you. Once you have this course and the document, all you have to do is dovetail it, get it going in your school, talk to other colleagues about it, answer some of the questions, go to it, and let's see if we can really learn how to motivate some of these disaffected kids that we have.